right, well, we're starting a new series. This is going to take us into Easter, and it's called The Betrayers of Easter. The Betrayers of Easter. We toyed around with the villains of Easter, but that sounded a little bit Disney-like. So we actually landed on the Betrayers of Easter for this series. So we're going to be looking at the different characters that are involved in the Easter story, the story of especially leading up to Passion Week and the crucifixion of Christ and resurrection. But we're going to look specifically at those who betrayed Jesus. And you ask, well, why are we doing? Well, there's some characteristics and some choices among them that I think is important for us to look at. And if you're like me, you're going to see some of yourself in this. And I think that's the point, is for us to see the differences in some of these betrayers of Christ. So when I say the word betrayer, or who are some people that come to your mind? I had some fun this week kind of looking at this, a list of betrayers in history. And actually one of the top ones is Marcus Brutus. Remember that guy that was a part of killing Julius Caesar, right? What's that famous line? Et tu, Brute? Well, anyway, you guys want to know where Julius Caesar's like, you too, Brutus? Because he was a part of killing him. That one didn't land, did it? That's okay. So another one is Benedict Arnold. Benedict Arnold, the Revolutionary War general, right? Who actually defected and sold out our countrymen, and we still feel like that, don't we? Another one, Mike and I just recently watched this movie, is Robert Hansen. Do you guys know that guy? He was, I can't remember what year he was caught, but he was an FBI agent that sold secrets to Russia over 20 years. He was like one of the most successful spies that was against America ever in American history. For 20 years he sold. He finally was caught. I mean, in the early 2000s, I think it was, and he was finally caught. But if you are looking at a historical list of betrayers, Judas is going to show up on that list. I mean, he is. He actually is like on most of the list I look like. He's in the top 5. Judas Iscariot, the one that betrayed Jesus, right? But it's interesting because Judas is not the only person that betrayed Jesus. There's more. So if you actually look at Matthew 26:31, and we're going to jump around a little bit in Scripture today. Mostly we're going to be in Matthew. We're going to land in John in one place. But if you look at just that verse, and this is at the Last Supper, Jesus says, then Jesus told them, he's talking to the disciples, this very night you will all fall away on account of me. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. So we're going to look specifically at Peter and Judas. Because they both betrayed him. But what's the difference? Because, we look at Judas and we think, man, you're talking about, I don't want to be that guy at the reckoning, right? That's bad. But Peter also betrayed him. But the stories are very different. Why? Why did Peter's end well and Judas's not? That's what we're going to look at. So we're going to get started in Matthew 10, verses 1 through 4. And we're going to kind of read several different scriptures because these stories go over a large sum of scripture. So we're going to jump around just a little bit. Jesus called his 12 disciples, this is chapter 10, verse 1 through 4. Jesus called his 12 disciples to him and gave them authority to drive out impure spirits and to heal every disease and sickness. These are the names of the 12 apostles. First, Simon, who is called Peter, and his brother Andrew, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the tax collector, James, son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. Okay, so if you look at the beginning of that, they all start the same, don't they? They all start the same. And Judas is part of that. Now, this is written in retrospect of what happened. And so Matthew's saying, hey, I'll make sure you know what Judas this is. This is the Judas that betrayed Jesus. But they were all given authority to do ministry. They were all equipped to do ministry, and Judas and Peter are equal in this. So the beginning is not where the problem lies. They all start the same. They all start with the giftedness to, Jesus gives them authority to do what he calls them to do. So now let's look at Judas. We're going to take a look at him first. So let's go to Matthew 26, and we're going to look at Matthew 26. We're going to look at verses 14 through 16 first. Okay, so then one of the 12, the one called Judas Iscariot, went to the... That's all right, no problem. You got it. Oh, just swipe up. Nope. It's okay. Mike, can you help her? We could just let him read it. You got it. All right, we're good. No problem. I thought it was kind of fun. All right. Then one of the 12, the one called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and asked, What are you willing to give me if I deliver him over to you? Now, that's a real interesting question, isn't it? What are you willing to give me if I deliver him over to you? So they counted out for him 30 pieces of silver. And from then on, Judas watched for an opportunity to hand him over. So here it starts. Or maybe this isn't the beginning. Maybe this is just where it's public. Maybe this is where it's clear what's been going on in Judas's mind. Because I suspect Judas had been considering something like this. You just don't do that level of betrayal without having contemplated it, right? So Judas knows that the religious leaders are after Jesus. There's no doubt that there's conflict there. There's been times that if he wasn't in the public setting, they would have already arrested him. It's tricky for the religious leaders, though. They want to get rid of Jesus, but they also know if they do that in a public setting, there's going to be a riot. And if there's a riot, Rome is going to come down and is going to level them. And they know that. So the religious leaders are always kind of trying to keep this balance of how do we maintain the control that we want and keep Rome from taking over. So they were very open to an insider, which is exactly what they got, is Judas the insider sells Jesus out for 30 pieces of silver. Now, some people go, well, is there significance in the 30 pieces of silver? Probably. I'm not sure. I know that was typically the amount of money that was given for a woman, not for a man. So it could possibly even been less than what he would have expected. I don't know. I'm just kind of guessing on that one. But now let's skip over to Matthew 26, 23 through 25, and this is at the Last Supper, okay? Jesus replied, "The one who has dipped his hand into the bowl with me will betray me. The Son of Man will go first, just as it is written about him, but woe to the man who betrays the Son of Man. It would be better for him if he had not been born." Then Judas, the one who would betray him, said, "Surely you don't mean me, Rabbi." Surely you don't mean me, Rabbi. So hang on to that, because that's going to sound real familiar in a second to something else that we hear with Peter. So Jesus is fully aware. He is fully aware of what's going on. He knows, and it's been prophesied too. I mean, he knows this is going to happen. He knows that what Judas is doing, and he calls Judas out on it. Now, this is where it's interesting to me, because Judas still has a choice in this, doesn't he? Now, he knows that Jesus knows. He still could have chosen differently. This is not decided. This is not ended. He could have made a different decision. He doesn't listen to the warning, or if he does, it doesn't stop him. And he just simply replies, "Not me, surely. Surely you don't mean me, teacher. Surely you don't mean me, Rabbi." Now let's keep going. Matthew 27, and we're going to look at 1 through 5. Early in the morning, this is after the arrest of Jesus. Early in the morning, all the chief priests and the elders of the people made their plans how to have Jesus executed. So they bound him, they led him away, and they handed him over to Pilate the governor. When Judas, who had betrayed him, saw that Jesus was condemned, he was seized with remorse, and he returned the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders. I've sinned, he said, for I have betrayed innocent blood. What is it to us, they replied. That's not your response. That's your responsibility. So Judas threw the money in the temple and left, and then went away and hanged himself. It's a horrible ending. It's a horrible ending. And I know that we read this, we know the whole story, and I felt this too. He got what he deserved. He got what he deserved, right? I mean, he betrayed Christ. He was there for 3 years. He betrayed Christ. He got what he deserved. But do our hearts break? Do our hearts break? Because it didn't have to end this way. Judas experiences remorse. Now, whether or not that's repentance, we don't know. We don't know. But he does experience remorse, and he goes and tries to at least appease his mind, right? I mean, I think at this point he knows he's not stopping this thing. It's already in motion. The ship has sailed, so to speak. There is no turning back. But he's remorseful about it. He attempts to at least give back the money, and of course that doesn't even work out. And so he ends his life. He steps out of this completely. Now, I don't know why Judas betrayed Jesus. I think that there's two really logical reasons why, but these may not be right. This is opinion, okay? I tend to think that he was trying to force Jesus' hand. That he was wanting Jesus to be a different kind of Messiah. The kind of Messiah that would take Rome out and relieve them from that. And I think that because of the remorse that he felt when he realized that Jesus didn't do what he wanted him to do. I want to believe that he never thought he would actually be killed or executed. Now, I don't have any way of proving that, but it kind of makes sense to me the way that the way he responded. He tried to force his hand. He tried to make him be a different kind of Messiah. And Jesus wasn't the kind of Messiah he was to be. He was to provide eternal salvation for them, not to just kick Rome out temporarily. But there's another good possibility too, and it shows up in John 12, where John talks about how Judas has been stealing money. It says he was a thief and he had helped himself to part of the treasury. So it could have been about money. It could have been about money. Whatever it was, there was obviously something in Judas's character that had been there for a while, and it showed up, and it just didn't. Unfortunately, being with Jesus for 3 years didn't cause him to make choices to change that. Unfortunately, but here's what I want us to see about this: is Judas ended his story. He ended his story. He took his own life, and when he did that, he removed the option of redemption. He removed the option of redemption. So you're saying, Marnie, that there was an option for him to be forgiven? Absolutely. Absolutely. Without question, there was that option for him to be forgiven. But he removed it by stepping out of his story. He also chose to disconnect from his community of faith, which was the disciples at that time. That's a bad move. That's a bad move. When you're in the grips of sin and you're contemplating things that are bad, one of the worst things you can do is disconnect from the people that will tell you the truth. He did that too. Disconnected from his community. He stepped back from Jesus, and he stepped into one of the most horrible sins. And he betrayed Christ. When he felt remorse over it, he ended his story. All right, that's how Judas ends. Now let's look at Peter, okay? Let's take a look at Peter. So we're going to go back to Matthew 6. We're going to look at Matthew 16. And we're going to look at 13 through 20, okay? So now we're backing up. This is before the whole Holy Week and Passion Week, that stuff starts. Okay. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do you say the Son of Man is?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." "But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You're the Messiah, the Son of God, the living God." Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for this was not revealed to you by the flesh and blood, but by my Father in heaven. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." And then he ordered his disciples not to tell anybody that he was the Messiah. Okay, so here's this encounter where Jesus has got the disciples, and things are starting to ramp up, and they're seeing miracles, and they're seeing things happen, and it just hasn't been said yet clearly who he is. And he says, "Hey, who do people say I am?" And so they give him the options of who he said, and then he finally says, "Okay, well, who do you say I am?" And here goes Peter doing what Peter does. He jumps in line first, right? With his big mouth open. He's a good example of my big fat mouth that we've been talking about. And he gets it. He nails it this time, doesn't he? And he says, you're the Son of God. You're the Messiah. You're the Son of the living God. Peter's got it right. And Jesus says to him, "Peter, you don't know that because of flesh. That's divine information that you have. God's revealed that to you, that you know this." And he got that right. And then Jesus says to him, "I got plans for you, Peter." And he has this play on words on his name about the rock, right? And he's like, this foundation of you, of what my church is going to be built on. It's exactly what happened, right? It's exactly what happened. And it just looks so good for Peter. And then the very next thing that comes out of Peter's mouth, look at verse 21. So very next verse. "From that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and he must be killed, and on the third day be raised to life again." Jesus is real clear. This is what's going to happen. Now here comes Peter. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, Jesus. "Never, Lord," he said, "this shall never happen to you." And Jesus turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan." It's pretty strong. "You are a stumbling block to me, and you do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." Here Peter is. I mean, he just had just gotten it. I mean, he just had made the clearest connection, the most important connection of all time. This is the Messiah. And Jesus has told him exactly what his life is going to be. And the next words out of his mouth is, he corrected Jesus. I mean, that's pretty bold. But why does Jesus come down like a hammer on him? Because it's the same. If I'm right about Judas not wanting, Judas being upset that Jesus wasn't the kind of Messiah he wanted him to be, this is kind of what that is here.